The reality is people do die from opioid withdrawal. They die from the consequences of dehydration, which gives you a sense of just how bad the symptoms can be, that people can have such profound diarrhea and vomiting that they can actually get dehydrated to the point that they die from it.
A train roars past, and for a fleeting second, the turbulent wake it leaves behind feels as sharp as a blade. Chicago in winter offers no compromise. It doesn't merely cool down, it relentlessly cuts through everything. It seeks out the smallest gap in your zipper, invades the space between fabric and skin. It transforms wet socks into a rapidly escalating crisis. It turns even a single night spent without shelter into a perilous chain of risks that most people are fortunate enough never to have to consider. Now, let me pose a few questions to you. If your paycheck were to stop arriving today, how many weeks could you realistically afford to keep your home? Should your heating system fail in the depths of January, where would you find a place to sleep that very night? If you were compelled to carry every single possession you own, what would you truly keep and what would you be forced to abandon? And if the city itself instructed you, move along, where exactly would you go when every street and corner offers only the bite of the cold? Tonight, our compelling story begins right here in Chicago, a city renowned for its architectural strength and iconic skyline.
When you think about someone using opioids, whatever reason they start using opioids, which could be for pain relief, it could be for fun or experimentation, it could be for emotional pain relief.
A metropolis where millions move with focused purpose throughout the day. Yet, after dark, a strikingly different Chicago emerges, one that is quiet, utterly exhausted, and desperately fighting to stay warm long enough to merely greet the morning. Welcome to Homeless US News. Please stay with us until the very end, because this video delves into more than just hardship. It's an exploration of the intricate, often hidden systems that operate beneath the city's surface. It examines the seemingly small choices that can inadvertently push people out onto the streets, and the systemic gaps that then keep them trapped there. Crucially, it also highlights the tangible solutions that can draw people back in one warm night, one essential document, one secure bed, and one vital key at a time.
And really importantly, to not die from overdose, which is one of the most important factors of treatment with medications for opioid use disorder. It's easy to think like, oh, it's just the flu, someone can just get through it, or they should just tough it out. And you layer that into the fact that our societal notions about addiction and about drug use have generally been that people are doing something bad and immoral and illegal.
Part 1, to Chicago's one winter. By day, Chicago pulsates with a palpable sense of forward momentum. The bustling loop fills to capacity with a steady stream of commuters. The elevated trains diligently traverse their familiar routes. Coffee shops buzz with activity and conversation. Office elevators steadily climb, carrying ambitions skyward. The impressive skyline stands firm beneath a canopy of gray clouds, a steadfast promise that the city will endure and continue its relentless progress, no matter the circumstances. But as the sun dips below the horizon early in the winter months, Chicago undergoes a profound transformation. The very same underpasses that felt unremarkable and ordinary at noon quickly become emergency shelters by midnight. Train stations, usually places of transit, morph into arenas of sheer endurance. Parking garages, typically for vehicles, quietly serve as makeshift bedrooms. And beneath the sprawling city, through an intricate network of tunnels, corridors, and underground walkways, people search for something truly basic. Not luxury or comfort, simply a desperately needed reprieve from the biting wind. If you've never personally experienced it, it's remarkably difficult to convey just how intensely cold it can feel here. The air blowing off the lake isn't merely cold, it's a moving, penetrating cold. It actively seeks out any exposed skin, relentlessly drawing heat from your body far faster than you'd ever anticipate. This profound chill turns even the simplest decision, where will I spend the night, into what feels like a grueling survival exam. This is precisely where the stark reality of the two Chicagos becomes utterly impossible to ignore. Above ground, the cheerful twinkle of holiday lights, the rustle of shopping bags, the inviting glow of warm storefront windows, and the joyful sound of laughter spilling out from bustling restaurants. Below ground, a parallel existence unfolds, a poignant life that most people casually pass by without ever truly seeing. A person layering to pairs of socks because that is the entirety of what they possess. A woman diligently rubbing her hands together, a desperate effort to maintain their function and sensation. A father meticulously counting train stops because the simple predictability of routine helps his children remain calm amidst chaos. A man carefully clutching a plastic bag filled with documents as if it were pure gold, understanding that without those critical papers, countless essential doors will remain irrevocably closed. And here lies the detail that carries the most profound significance. Homelessness in a winter city isn't solely a matter of lacking housing. It is fundamentally about time. Time until the next warming space might open its doors. Time until the very last train completes its run and stops for the night. Time until fingers begin to lose all feeling and go numb. Time until a persistent cough escalates into something far more severe and threatening. Time until a phone battery inevitably dies, transforming a car that once offered temporary shelter into nothing more than a cold, unforgiving metal box. So, when your gaze falls upon someone just sitting in a train station or nestled beneath an overpass, endeavor to truly understand what you are witnessing. You are observing a person meticulously managing a complex, minute-by-minute schedule of survival within a city that never, ever slows its pace. And that observation ultimately prompts a question well worth pondering deeply. In a place as remarkably powerful and resource-rich as Chicago, why is basic warmth still a commodity that so many individuals are compelled to relentlessly chase? Part 2. The Fall, How Stable Lives Break. Many people tend to imagine homelessness as the result of a single, definitive decision, or perhaps a singular, isolated mistake. In reality, it is far more akin to navigating a precarious staircase with a distressing number of missing steps. One problem alone doesn't invariably lead to homelessness. However, one problem can indeed trigger a cascading chain of events that becomes incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to halt. It frequently begins with something utterly ordinary and commonplace. Hours at work are unexpectedly cut back. A cherished family member falls seriously ill. Reliable childcare arrangements suddenly collapse. A significant rent increase arrives, offering no quarter or mercy. A necessary car repair proves to be far more extensive and costly than anticipated. A devastating medical bill lands on the doorstep at the absolute worst possible moment. Then, a quiet, insidious stress begins to set in. You find yourself skipping one essential payment in a desperate effort to cover another. You begin to borrow from anyone and everyone willing to lend. You stretch your meager resources thinner and thinner. You repeatedly promise yourself that this difficult situation is merely temporary. But winter, with its relentless grip, waits for no one's temporary solution. A landlord eventually posts an eviction notice. A friend's couch, once a refuge, is already fully occupied. A well-meaning relative offers, just for a few nights. But then the unspoken tension in the small space begins to rise palpably. A heated family argument, fueled by emotions amplified in cramped living conditions, erupts into a sudden, forced exit. And in a city where housing costs have consistently escalated at a rate far outstripping the growth of most paychecks, the crucial margin for error becomes progressively thinner with each passing year. That particular aspect is often overlooked by many. Homelessness isn't solely a personal narrative of individual struggle. It is also, profoundly, a story of unforgiving mathematics. If rent prices continue their ascent while wages fail to keep pace, people don't actively choose homelessness. They are, in effect, priced directly into a perilous state of risk. Chicago also confronts another harsh reality. People frequently arrive here, seeking a haven of safety and stability. Yet the existing system profoundly struggles to adequately absorb and support them. Shelters quickly become overcrowded beyond capacity. Short-term support initiatives often run out before needs are met. Individuals find themselves tragically trapped between not enough help and an overwhelming abundance of needs. And then comes that pivotal, life-altering moment, the very first night spent outside. Because once you are forced to live outdoors, you instantly lose an array of fundamental things that most people casually take for granted. A stable and verifiable address, a secure and safe place to store important documents, a reliable means to charge your essential phone, a private and uninterrupted space simply to rest. Without these absolute basics, even the process of applying for help or services becomes an impossibly arduous task. And that painful reality gives rise to a truly heartbreaking paradox. Sometimes, the very system designed to help is structured like this. You require a foundation of stability to gain access to crucial services. Yet, you desperately need those very services in order to regain any semblance of stability. Thus, the initial fall rapidly spirals into an inescapable loop. And in the brutal heart of winter, such a loop is not merely frustrating, it is lethally dangerous. Part 3. When the system is not built for the most vulnerable. Let's now delve into a discussion about the system itself, not with an intent to assign blame, but rather to foster a deeper understanding. Because homelessness extends beyond mere individual hardship, it is also critically shaped by the very design and implementation of assistance. In numerous cities, shelters and support services undeniably exist. Dedicated people work tirelessly within them. Outreach teams consistently show up in challenging conditions. Volunteers generously serve meals. Staff members valiantly attempt to stretch extremely limited resources as far as they possibly can. But here is the inherent conflict that Chicago starkly reveals. A city battling harsh winter conditions demands rapid access to help. Yet, tragically, many systemic processes operate at an agonizingly slow pace. People are frequently asked to provide paperwork that they cannot safely store or protect. They are instructed to return on a different day, at an entirely different location, often during hours that directly conflict with crucial work or essential transit schedules. They are expected to adhere to a myriad of rules that may appear logical on paper, but utterly collapse when confronted with the complex realities of street life. Furthermore, some systemic barriers disproportionately impact certain communities with even greater severity. In Chicago, the insidious roots of racial inequity run deep, and its effects are glaringly evident in disparities concerning housing access, employment opportunities, healthcare availability, and the critically narrow margin of error that families of color are afforded. When a community has endured generations of systemic displacement and been denied equitable opportunities, the crushing risk of homelessness is simply not shared evenly across the population. This discussion is not intended to cast judgment upon anyone. It is, instead, about confronting and acknowledging a stark reality. Because if the system insists on treating everyone the same, when individuals begin from vastly different starting positions, the ultimate outcomes will inevitably be anything but fair or equitable. Another significant system gap is a pervasive lack of capacity. When shelters quickly reach their full occupancy early in the evening, the individuals who arrive later, perhaps due to late work shifts, urgent caregiving responsibilities, physical disabilities, or even profound fear, are inevitably the ones left exposed outside. When warming centers are activated only during the most extreme cold alerts, people who are suffering acutely on merely regular cold nights can easily slip through the cracks of the system. Then there is the immense emotional weight that people carry. Imagine the sheer burden of living with constant, gnawing uncertainty. Will I manage to find a safe bed tonight? Will I be sternly told to vacate this train station? Will my few precious belongings still be here when I return? Will my phone battery finally die before the case manager manages to call me? Will I miss my critical appointment because the bus never arrived? Or because I had to spend the entire day engaged in the exhausting struggle to simply stay warm? This relentless kind of stress fundamentally alters the human mind. It renders effective planning incredibly difficult. It makes sustained patience a far greater challenge. It causes trust to become painfully fragile. And when that crucial trust breaks, people eventually stop showing up, not because they don't desire help, but because the very act of showing up has, in their past experiences, caused them pain or disappointment. So, if our collective goal is to see fewer people enduring life on the streets, We must cease treating homelessness as a simplistic moral failing and instead begin to approach it as a complex design problem. Because, unlike moral failings, design can always be improved upon. And in the unforgiving grip of a Chicago winter, intelligent design possesses the power to save lives. Part 4. The Loop That Never Ends. Chicago is home to a distinctive elevated train line that traces a circular path around its downtown core. And that very circle inadvertently becomes a powerful symbol for something far darker. The pervasive feeling of living a life that seems to perpetually move in circles, never truly progressing forward. For many individuals living without stable housing, days often blur into monotonous routines meticulously constructed around the relentless pursuit of basic access. Functional bathrooms, essential heat, reliable transit, nutritious meals, accessible charging outlets for devices, a relatively safe and undisturbed corner to rest without being summarily told to move. Now, layer winter onto this reality. The piercing cold forces constant, often aimless movement. This perpetual movement relentlessly breaks down any fragile semblance of stability. And this broken stability, in turn, makes it exponentially harder to escape the cycle of homelessness. And then there is the profound heartbreak of repeated displacement, when someone is forcibly compelled to move again and again due to aggressive enforcement, due to sudden shelter closures, due to pressure from unsympathetic neighbors, or simply because they are told, "You can't stay here." They systematically lose the very things that the system itself paradoxically demands for assistance: crucial documents, life-sustaining medication, essential phone chargers, scheduled appointments, any forward momentum they might have painstakingly built. This is precisely how the story of homelessness becomes, for so many, endless. Not because people aren't trying with all their might, but because the very ladder they are attempting to climb keeps losing its vital rungs. And the true cost of this endless struggle manifests in a quiet, often unseen way that cameras frequently fail to capture: the erosion of identity. When someone endures life on the streets for an extended period, they often begin to avoid reflections. They stop looking at themselves in mirrors or shop windows. They gradually stop feeling like the person they once were, not because they have forgotten who they are deep down, but because the world around them relentlessly continues to treat them as if they are not someone worth seeing, worth acknowledging. However, here is a truth we have learned repeatedly and consistently. People do not shed their fundamental humanity on the street. What they lose is stability. What they lose is restorative sleep. What they lose is basic safety. And without that crucial foundation of stability, the finest, most resilient parts of a person become tragically buried beneath an overwhelming, crushing exhaustion. So the pivotal question that faces us becomes, do we continue to fund a systemic loop that merely shuffles people around from one temporary spot to another? Or do we commit to building genuine exits that effectively move people forward towards lasting stability? Because the city can persist in simply managing the visible aspects of homelessness, applying superficial fixes, or it can choose to begin investing in the concrete strategies that actually reduce homelessness. Proactive prevention measures, access to truly stable, permanent housing, comprehensive wraparound support services, and the implementation of systems that are thoughtfully designed to genuinely match the complexities of real life. Part 5. Quiet Hands in a Loud City. Now, we shift our focus to something equally vital. Because if this story were solely about suffering, it would remain tragically incomplete. Chicago also harbors countless quiet, compassionate hands that work tirelessly to keep people alive and offer hope. These are hands that rarely make the headlines or seek public acclaim. These are hands that do not wait for official permission to simply care for their fellow human beings. Faith communities diligently serving hot, nourishing meals on predictable days, providing a crucial sense of stability that people can truly rely on. Students passionately organizing winter clothing drives, distributing much-needed gloves and hats to individuals at the ends of freezing train lines. Dedicated outreach teams consistently walking the same routes, learning names, building trust, and showing up again and again even after someone initially said not today. Transit staff, thoughtfully trained to respond with patience and empathy, rather than immediate punishment when they encounter someone who is clearly struggling. And then there is the invaluable support that unhoused people extend to one another. This profound mutual aid is rarely depicted, but it is unequivocally real and deeply impactful. People generously share vital information. They warn each other about brutally cold nights and the rare opportunities of open doors for shelter. They share spare socks, a small but significant comfort. They share precious phone chargers, a lifeline to the outside world. They simply sit with someone who is experiencing a panic attack, ensuring they are not utterly alone in their fear. In the deepest, most unforgiving parts of winter, these fundamental human connections coalesce into a protective net. Not a flawless net, by any means, but a vital net that prevents someone from falling completely, irrevocably through the cracks. And here is the smallest, yet most profoundly powerful, detail of all: a person's name. When someone says, "Hey, I remember you," it transforms the entire day, injecting a spark of recognition. When someone says, "I saved your spot for you," it brings a sense of belonging that can change the entire week. When someone says, "Let's navigate this step together," it offers partnership and hope that can alter the course of the whole month, because loneliness, in its isolating grip, makes the burden of homelessness exponentially heavier. Genuine recognition, in its compassionate acknowledgement, makes it undeniably lighter. And this is precisely why community truly matters, not merely as an abstract slogan or an empty platitude, but as a real, vibrant, and living force that possesses the power to keep someone connected, anchored, and resilient enough to eventually find their way indoors. Part 6: Long-Term Solutions. Stopping the fire, not chasing the smoke. Chicago, fundamentally, does not require more empty slogans or political promises. It urgently needs a comprehensive, actionable plan that functions effectively in the depths of winter as well as the height of summer. A plan that unequivocally treats homelessness like the profound crisis it undeniably is, but also views it as the solvable problem it can absolutely be when systemic efforts are properly aligned. So what does the phrase long-term solutions truly entail and mean in practice? It signifies a crucial shift from a perpetual cycle of emergency response to the establishment of stable, sustainable pathways out of homelessness. Solution 1: prevention that moves fast. The most economical and humane form of homelessness to solve is, without question, the homelessness that is entirely prevented from ever occurring. This necessitates emergency rental assistance that arrives swiftly, long before an eviction notice is ever served. It means mediation services that effectively prevent a family dispute from tragically escalating into a street exit. It calls for utility assistance programs that keep essential heat on during the critical winter peaks, and it involves providing short-term support for individuals recovering from illness or injury, ensuring they don't lose their housing while they heal and recuperate. Solution 2: real low-barrier winter access. In a city gripped by winter's harshness, the directive to come back tomorrow can literally be a matter of life or death. Low barrier means access doors that open quickly and without excessive hurdles. It means operating hours that are thoughtfully designed to match the complex realities of people's daily lives. It necessitates policies that do not penalize individuals simply for being in crisis. Fundamentally, it means offering warmth, safety, basic storage for belongings, and a clear, navigable pathway to the very next step towards stability. Solution 3: housing first with support. The philosophy of housing first is emphatically not about free housing with no responsibility. It is, rather, the profound recognition that foundational stability must come first, thereby creating the essential conditions under which sustainable recovery can truly take root and endure. The simple act of receiving a key to a home changes absolutely everything. It makes adhering to medication regimens infinitely easier. It makes consistent, restorative sleep genuinely possible. It renders job schedules and employment opportunities realistically attainable. It makes the crucial act of parenting possible and viable. And crucially, it makes profound personal healing genuinely possible. Once housing is secured, comprehensive services are then carefully wrapped around that housing to ensure its long-term stability and success. Solution 4. Navigation that reduces friction. People seeking help require a metaphorical front door that is straightforward and uncomplicated. This means a single, coordinated entry point for services. It entails clear, easily understood steps for accessing aid. It includes dedicated assistance with document replacement. It requires case managers who are equipped with realistic caseloads, allowing them to provide adequate support. And it necessitates transportation support, ensuring that vital appointments don't become impossible to keep. Solution 5. Measurable accountability. This is not about glossy press releases or carefully staged photo opportunities. This is about genuine impact. It demands a public-facing dashboard that transparently tracks the outcomes that truly matter. How many individuals successfully moved indoors this month? How many people remain stably housed at the 6-month and 1-year marks? How many individuals regrettably returned to homelessness and, crucially, why did that happen? Where exactly are the systemic bottlenecks and inefficiencies within the current system? When critical data is made visible and accessible, excuses inevitably diminish, and effective collaboration organically flourishes. Solution 6. Equity as an outcome, not a promise. When specific communities disproportionately shoulder a heavier burden of homelessness, the solutions implemented must reach them in genuinely impactful and equitable ways. This translates to culturally competent outreach methods. It requires comprehensive language access services. It mandates the fair and just distribution of available resources. And it necessitates accountability mechanisms that meticulously measure who is being effectively helped, not merely how many individuals are being served in a superficial manner. This is the true meaning of ceasing to chase the smoke. It means diligently building the robust, preventative structure that actively stops the fire from ever igniting in the first place. Outro: the fight against the wind. Chicago's winter possesses an unflinching ability to reveal the unvarnished truth, not the comfortable narratives we prefer to tell ourselves, but the hard-won truths that the street itself teaches. It teaches us that warmth is not a mere luxury to be enjoyed, that uninterrupted sleep is not an insignificant thing, that fundamental stability is not a reward to be earned. It is, in fact, the indispensable foundation that renders everything else in life genuinely possible. To the resilient individuals surviving in train stations, beneath underpasses, and in frigid corners tonight, you are not invisible here. Your life is not merely a cold statistic. You are profoundly more than your hardest season. And to everyone watching this from the warmth of indoors, here is the profound question this city implicitly poses to all of us. What kind of community do we aspire to be when the wind is at its fiercest, when the challenges are greatest? Because the fight against homelessness is not won by one grand, sweeping gesture. It is, instead, painstakingly won by thousands of consistent, often small, actions. A prevention program funded early enough to avert an eviction. A warming space that is actually open precisely when people desperately need it. A diligent case manager who consistently calls back. A compassionate volunteer who helps replace lost, critical documents. A landlord partnership that transforms a dismissive no into a life-changing yes. A neighbor who consciously chooses empathy and engagement instead of silence and indifference. So, here is what you can actively do this week. Share this video widely, so these compelling stories reach people who still mistakenly believe homelessness is someone else's issue. Leave a comment detailing your city and what social issues you would like us to investigate next. Actively support local organizations that transparently publish their outcomes, and treat every individual with inherent dignity and respect. If you are able to volunteer your time, choose the less glamorous but incredibly impactful work, assisting with moving crews, organizing ID clinics, or coordinating winter supply drives. That is precisely where real, tangible change begins. And if you vote or speak at community meetings, demand concrete numbers and clear timelines from leaders, not vague adjectives or empty promises. This is Homeless US News. If you continue to stay with us, we are committed to relentlessly telling these stories with unwavering truth, profound dignity, and a focus on actionable solutions, because no one should ever have to merely endure a city in order to deserve a place to call home. Chicago will, without doubt, continue to get cold. The critical question is whether we will continue to allow people to face that brutal cold alone. Not later, not somewhere else, not someone else. Now, here, US.